Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for Rapid7's Expert on Expert series. We've had some phenomenal folks on the program, but today we've one-upped it and we have someone special, our own vibe coding Chief Executive Officer of Rapid7, Corey Thomas. Corey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Craig, it's great to join you on one of these sessions.
AI is clearly reshaping inside of cybersecurity, but also software development. There's a lot of noise about what it will replace and what it won't replace. Give me your perspective of what's the real shifts that cybersecurity leaders should be focusing on.
Look, I think part of what's happening right now is it's new, we're touching the boundaries, and we know it's going to be a change, a significant change. We just don't know the order of magnitude change and the direction of the change. There's a couple of things that are clear out the gate that organizations and cybersecurity professionals are clearly seeing. One, every company that does any type of development, whether that's DevSecOps development or regular development, is seeing massive boosts in productivity. Whether that's transformational or not, yet to be seen. We can talk more about that in a little bit, but they're seeing boosts there. In cybersecurity, there's some incredibly exciting things that we're seeing and that we're looking forward to. One of the biggest areas that we've been focused on and that we see as big opportunities for cybersecurity is the ability to actually use it to do something that humans aren't great at, which is
Yeah.
process all the security telemetry that's happening at all the time. And no set of humans, no matter how many you have, can process all security telemetry at all times. And so harnessing the power of AI for that is a really, really big deal, and it's a massive opportunity.
So when we talk about that for a second, we've had two different categories, AI for live environments, so as part of your production operational system, and then AI for development. Talk about the AI for development for a second, focus. You're obviously focused on having Rapid7 at the bleeding edge of how do we operate and innovate for our customers. Let's talk a little bit about how we're using AI internally to enable our customers to be more successful.
Yeah, so when we think about how we enable customers, it actually comes down to a couple of things. Is one, how do we actually use AI to actually offset where humans struggle, frankly? Humans have a hard time doing consistent, repetitive work at all times. If you think back a couple of years, we thought automation was going to solve lots of this. But the problem that we all had in the industry is no one really trusted automation. Like, there's a reason that security orchestration automation technologies didn't take off is because frankly they just weren't that smart. They were kind of rote. Is you programmed it, it had strict logic, and that strict logic means that it did not know that yes, you should do this 9 times, but on that 10th time, no, this is something different. You should not do that. And so what we're seeing right now is a whole bunch of use cases, which we'll get to Cloud Code, about how do you use AI for software security? How do you use it for security operations monitoring? How do you actually use it to make smarter response and remediation technologies? All of these things are in play. Now, they don't all come out the box. And I think one of the things that we'll probably spend a little bit of time talking about is what's the precursors to being able to leverage AI technologies, because you cannot take any generic LLM model and get many of the benefits that we're talking about.
So let's go there for a second. We've talked about the type of data you need in order for AI to be successful in the cybersecurity defensive posture. What are some of the things and data sets that AI needs to have in order to protect?
Yeah, so one, it depends on which domain you're actually looking at. But our belief is that if you want smart AI, it needs to have rich context. By the way, that's true for any large language model. So for us, that means that it has to understand the context of the environment. It has to understand like what are the technologies that are deployed, what's the configuration of those, what are the controls, what are the vulnerabilities, and then what are those technologies doing? What are the
Mhm.
activities that they're doing? If you just have one of those, if you just know the activities, but you don't actually know the context of the environment that the activities happen, then you're going to waste a bunch of effort. When I was talking to one of our customers, they were just like, oh, so it's almost like you don't know whether you actually want to buy earthquake insurance in Georgia or California. So you can have some people buy earthquake insurance in Florida when they need hurricane insurance. And so context matters deeply. And one of the things that organizations have to figure out is, do I have the right context to trust it? Because if you don't have the right data, it's not organized in the right way, you won't have the context to actually generate high quality results.
You talked for a second about large data sets. That brings us to detection and response, which is one of the hottest areas of AI innovation. Let's take a second to both look back and then look forward. So look back at some of the trends we've seen, and then look forward for what we predict. What have some of the been the biggest changes of customer expectations around managed detection and response over the last year?
Yeah, so if you look back, if you go back 10 years ago, this was a market that was dominated by technologies like SIMs. And the big issue that people had there was they were expensive, they were complex to set up, and people could not solve the 24 by 7 issue, which is how you monitor it. Well, MDRs came along and it took a subset of the data that was the most critical data, and it offered 24 by 7 monitoring, but it was of a subset of the data in the environment and a subset of the context. The promise in the future, and the thing that has us most excited, and where we're spending lots of investment and effort, but we also think it's great for the security industry, is that we have the promise of actually being able to actually monitor the full environment and all the data of the environment on a 24 by 7 basis. That's something that's not been economically feasible. Now, part of what's required to do this is you have to have the right data, the right context, but you also have to have the right domain expertise. You cannot go ask an AI to build a 24 by 7 monitoring model because it's not going to have neither the data, and even if you just dumped all the data in there, it would not have the domain expertise that's required to do that. By the way, this is one of the big reasons that you see the biggest innovations that you're seeing in the field of AI are areas where organizations or companies that have domain expertise are applying those domain expertise. That's what you see with the advent of cloud code also.
So you talked about the one expectation of an MDR is how it's gone from subsets of data to all of the data.
Yeah.
Talk about some of the other expectations because a lot of different definitions of MDR exist today in the market. What else are you hearing from customers around what they're expecting an MDR to do?
Oh, this is fascinating. One, customers' expectations are moving rapidly. So if you see everything from people want, look, it's always interesting when you have high stake things. People have one set of expectations and rules when things are going fine. It turns out that people have a completely different set of expectations when things are not going fine. And so when things aren't going fine, people want to know, do I actually have the not just the ability to monitor the full environment and not miss anything, but do I have a team and an operation that stands behind it? Can that team help me understand what happened, what broke, what went wrong? Do I have the response capabilities to actually stop things as they're happening in the process? So the rich, smart, intelligent automation capabilities. Am I constrained on the number of investigations or forensics analysis that I need to do? Because the last thing I need to do when something's going bad is to go write another check. At the core of it, people are looking for the intersection of a couple things. Yes, they want the technology, but they're looking for great partnerships and great partnerships that cover them for whatever happens when bad things happen. And that's the core of what we're hearing from many customers about what they're looking for.
Now, we often talk internally and with our customers about the shift between a reactive and preemptive posture. Reactive posture, alerts come in, someone's going to manage and see if I'm protected. But we all know that people are looking for organizational partners, people that are anticipating and identifying. Can you talk about what preemptive means at Rapid7 and how we're thinking
Yeah.
about this?
So it's interesting. One of the things that and this is one that's customer driven. So when you think about the customer expectations that come along, look, I'll just say the bulk of our customers and the bulk of the organizations we talk to are just trying to solve yesterday's problem of how do I get scale on the monitoring. But we have actually a really impressive cohort of customers that are there. And what they're realizing is that the biggest risk they have is actually how they manage their attack surface and how they move from the reactive stance to the proactive stance. And really, what that means specifically is it's understanding the full attack surface. It's understanding where attacks are likely to occur. It's understanding what are the most attractive parts of your environment for exposures. Where you have those attractive environment for exposures, we know those are ideal spots that people are going to attack. How do I not just remediate those quickly? How do I identify those quickly? And how do I have preset remediation plans in place and response plans in place? This is what it means to move from reactive to preemptive security. It's an anticipatory thing where you know what's going to happen and you leverage that knowledge and that experience to anticipate, like, well, we know this is likely to happen. By the way, no organization can remediate everything all the time. There's
That's right.
definitely going to be exposures in the attack surface, but that doesn't mean that people can't have great planning. What we're finding is there's a massive trend. By the way, what's interesting is this is one where government may actually be ahead of most businesses. If you look at where most of the government regulatory pressure is actually coming, it's actually, and by the way, there's great thought leadership like Gartner and others who are actually advocating for the same thing. It is actually saying, yes, you have to get up to speed about what you're monitoring, but the more strategic and the more critical thing, both from a regulatory perspective and from a best practices perspective, is to actually anticipate what's going to happen, remediate in advance, or
That's right.
plan your response and remediation, and you're monitoring around that. That's the mastery of the attack surface that all the best practices are moving towards. That's not where the industry is today, but you can see the train. That's where everyone's moving towards.
Lot of focus of attack on cloud environments. The thing that's easy to spin up, the thing that might be more people spinning up than you'd want. Can we talk about how an MDR needs to evolve to ensure you're getting the adequate cloud coverage, regardless of the provider you work with?
Yeah, I mean, this is one. Your MDR technology has to mirror your technology strategy.
That's right.
And if you look at what's happening right now, is the technology strategy that most organizations have, are they're building more things faster in cloud environments using a bunch of different technologies with a bunch of different identities. And by the way, that's only accelerating with the advent of AI because people can build more stuff faster.
That's right.
And so when you think about it, is we're having an incredibly porous and increasing in volume of the attack surface. Well, there's some very simple prerequisites that we sort of, and by the way, these are best practices that are good. Is one, everything that your cloud provider provides to monitor, you should be monitoring. That's just like table stakes. Everyone's just actually doing that. It's a heavy investment, and I'm a big believer in the identity investment, but you have to have a
Mm,
heavy investment in being neutral and understanding what are all the identity traffic in your environment, and separating the good traffic from the bad traffic, and understand the identities, the roles, the responsibilities, and what's happening across the environment. So, cloud traffic, identity traffic, and also understanding what are the right security postures for the LLMs that are happening in your cloud environments. These we consider basic table stakes of understanding what's happening in the environment, and what it takes to monitor the environment. And so, whether that is cloud native technology, whether that's container security, whether that's partnership technologies that you have identities that access the environment, all of these things are the emerging table stakes, and you can't leave any of them off the table. Which is why I'm a deep believer that all of these areas have to be invested in. Rapid7 certainly invested in it. But regardless of which MDR technology you use, unless you're actually looking across that entire cloud landscape, you can't really know that you're actually monitoring the right things. And by the way, that's where some of the most aggressive innovation is happening. And so it's
mm.
more critical or not, because that's likely where you have the biggest flaws, the biggest bugs, the biggest vulnerabilities.
Now, one thing you push on aggressively, which we'll share with our audience, is the criticality of transparency around how AI is used. Can you talk a little bit more of that for customers of what they should be expecting from an MDR provider of how AI is used in triaging threats?
This is one where we got lucky because we were listening to our customers, and even prior to the AI wave that actually came along, when we did our market analysis and said, "Listen, where do we want to differentiate in the market?" When we talked to lots of people in the MDR market, lots of people have fundamental issues with, "I don't know what's going on in my MDR provider." And so we built ours from the ground up to actually have transparency. Anyone can log in at any moment, any time of the day, and audit what's happening in the environment. By the way, that stresses out our team.
I
I
can
would
vouch
ask
for that.
anyone out there, like, who wants to actually have someone looking in on what they're doing at every moment and every day? But it set a bar that, like, transparency, auditability, and accountability had to be core. And by the way,
Yeah.
it's helped us improve because we found some things like, hey, we don't love that. We have to improve that. But that culture ended up being pivotal now that we're in the world of AI. Because I would just say lots of MDR players and providers are going even more down the black box route. And the black box route, and when I say the black box route, it's just that, hey, just trust our technology and we're not going to really provide any accountability, any transparency about what's going on. That, by the way, is the default standard in the market for MDRs, is just trust what's happening until something blows up. That I think is going to be an ultimately failed standard. I think that increasingly when I talk to organizations, they want to know that they can audit, they can inspect, they can actually look at. And why wouldn't you have that? That builds
That's
trust.
right.
And so we've talked to industry leading experts, analysts, consultants. Is as you go forward, I think you're going to see a customer driven momentum where every customer, every RFP is going to say, like, I have to actually have transparency into how you're processing the alerts, how you do investigations. I need to be able to audit what's happening in the environment. I think that's going to become a new norm. We had the privilege of being early there from a strategic perspective, but I think it's a really, really big deal for every organization going forward.
All right, we're almost out of time, which leads us to our lightning round. So I'm going to hit you with a series of quick questions, quick answers back, number of different AI tools you use.
Five, maybe six. It goes up a lot. I
I,
use a lot of
I, I
tools.
can.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. What life advice would you give outside of work of how to live a happy life?
Oh, how to live a happy life. Um, Curiosity and nurturing relationships. I actually look, I have become more and more engaged in like take every moment with the friends that you actually have and live it to the fullest.
Number one piece of advice you'd give someone to grow their career.
Focus on who you are as a person and develop yourself, not just the checklist of milestones. I've gotten my best success by actually improving who I am as a team member, who I am as a leader, who I am as a SME, which is why I use all those AI technologies because I don't want to be left behind. But like if you focus on actually making yourself a better part of every team, then your career will be fine.
Everyone, thank you so much for joining our Vibe Coding CEO, Corey Thomas. Corey, thank you so much. And everyone, thank you for tuning in to this week's Experts on Expert.
Thanks, Greg.